Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Double Down with Breslo, where we cover the world of sports betting. We've had a little bit of a break, but we've got a great new episode for you. We haven't gone anywhere, and sports betting has just continued to have explosive growth in the U.S. The UK experienced it a while back, so they're kind of watching what's going on here, but UK has been far advanced, as most of us know, in sports betting than the U.S. So it's really interesting to bring on people from the UK as they watch it and as they try to also get a piece of this exploding US market. So along those lines, we've got Stuart Sims coming to us all the way from across the pond in England. He is the CEO of FairPlay Sports Media. Stuart, great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Right on. So it's interesting times, interesting times. We're definitely going to talk about the Trump election and what impact we think that's going to have on the industry. But I like to start with the background behind the name of the company, and in this case, I think it might be particularly relevant. So tell us about why the company is called FairPlay.
Yeah, of course. Well, FairPlay is a relatively new name that we've rebranded to in the course of the last 12 months. And FairPlay stands for leveling the playing field predominantly. We talk a lot about putting technology, data in the hands of consumers to enable them to be able to level the playing field and allow them to basically get access to similar technology to the sports books, therefore empowering them to make more informed decisions, to be more educated about what they're doing, and then to make it more fun and interesting. And I think that's incredibly relevant to the US audience, where they tend to be very data centric already, interested in technology. And in some ways, we've seen them kind of leapfrog a lot of the aspects of the UK.
Yeah, well, I'd like to know why that is. I'm going to hazard a guess because, sports betting in the US really exploded with fantasy sports. And fantasy sports is pretty geeky traditionally and very statistic oriented, down to the particular player. And of course, it's DraftKings and FanDuel that started that and then now are dominating traditional sports betting. I didn't predict that. When I saw that sports betting was coming, I thought it was going to be more your traditional Vegas players that were going to take that market because I thought that the player on DraftKings and FanDuel was not really your traditional player, but I've been proven totally wrong on that. But talk about how you see the fact that that's kind of how sports betting emerged here coming from fantasy.
Well, I think from my point of view, so firstly, I've worked and lived in the US a bit. In fact, most of my career has probably been spent working between the UK or Europe and the US, with latterly also a bit of Asia. But what really fascinated me even as a parent, right, on the sideline, I've got three daughters, and watching my kids play, we would not be able to quote any data about what's going on when my teenage daughters are playing lacrosse. But when I went and saw high school football in the US, I'd be standing next to someone who didn't have a child at the school, was a grandparent potentially of one of the kids, but would then recite back to me all of the data about what's going on, how many yards have been thrown, how many touchdowns that particular quarterback had thrown, even at high school. So I think from an early kind of period of my career, it was really evident to me that data was going to be a key kind of playground in the US for any sport. And I think that's what I'm really interested in, is the kind of data, tech, sport, media, and how all that comes together. So it wasn't for me a huge surprise to see that this kind of very data-centric social acceptance of data and sport was going to then proliferate into the betting arena, and then complement it rather than sports betting replacing it, which a lot of people predicted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm just thinking, football has 1,000 different statistics related to it, right?
Yeah.
And so does baseball. Compared to, say, your guys' sports, which is basically soccer, and soccer, which, there's kind of a limited number of statistics in soccer, right?
Well, you say that, but UK also has a very strong pedigree in horse racing, which I know is also popular in the US, but to a lesser degree. And you've got to remember the betting industry in the UK was predominantly built on horse racing to start with, which is incredibly data driven. So you could draw some parallels to the early days of the UK market, springing out of having a real access to data, but it was all done via newspapers and broadsheets and none of the online. So we started 25 years ago as Oddschecker, predominantly focusing on the horse racing market. So it's really interesting that a lot of the US sports have high relevance for how we built our technology and our products and our services. And we're finding that resonates with the US audience really nicely.
Interesting. Well, my lifetime as a sports bettor started in horse racing also. I'm kind of old enough to when you know the dad would take us to the races. I don't know how many dads are taking their kids to the races anymore. But we used to get taken to some really crappy racetracks. I can tell you that. I have some memories. I forget where they were, but they may have been outside of Philly, and then we lived in St. Louis. I know there was one in East St. Louis of all places that we used to go to. But you know, so there was the racing form, and I remember the racing form, and my dad teaching us how to read the racing form, which you know that went over a lot of people's head. Even that they just picked it based on the name and the number and the color. But kind of compare for me, you know, the racing form, the old school racing form, to what you now do with, you know, good old fashioned sports like, you know, football, basketball, and soccer.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think what's because we've been around such a long time, and we were part of such a big company. When I joined Oddschecker 2 years ago, I was blown away by the technology and platforms and data that we'd invested in as a business. We could do hundreds of millions of transactions per day, hundreds of thousands of transactions per second, to present consumers with that kind of form book that you were talking about, just all online, real time, and showing them some of the movements in prices, odds, and in terms of the races that were available to them. So we are in the UK, for all intents and purposes, the primary research site for people to go and place and do their research to then be able to place bets. In addition to that, in the UK, we allow people to transact with us to be able to place the bet itself through to the operators. And then we also provide a wide range of other tools and technology. So when we think about the US market, and we've taken that 25 years of experience, well, we kind of say, well, we can provide that experience not only through our own brand, but we can also provide that to third parties. So we have media properties throughout the world that utilize our technology to present consumers with more data, more information to make more informed decisions. And that tools and technology is complemented by our AI, which allows us to also offer predictions. So we can show them what's happening, we can show them the predictions for what we think about the sport, and then we can show them where to place their bet with the best price at the best time. So for us, that intersection of data is really interesting.
So give us an example of some analysis or statistics that you would provide a US bettor in any one of our major sports. You can pick the one that perhaps they weren't really getting before.
Well, so there's a number of things. So firstly, on any of the markets available in the US, we'll be able to provide odds and the price movements for any of those markets or micro markets, whether it's who's going to win pre-game or in-game, who would be, you know, how many yards are going to be thrown, how many touchdowns, how many blocks, how many sacks that there are on the quarterback. So we can cover all of those in terms of showing people the live odds for any of those particular markets. But in addition to that, we can also show real time what we believe the likelihood of those things are to happen. So we can show the probabilistic elements as well, showing where we think the market may be out relative to what the probability of that is happening. Further to that, we can react real time, low latency, using our deep learning neural network to then also react to injuries. We can react to change in formation, change of kicker. So we can actually bring into play real-time view of how the market is looking at that particular change and what's the probabilistic outcome that we think is more likely to happen.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, so as we know, odds are set based on the free market and public perceptions and public wagering, right? You know, Vegas, they start by setting a line. Let's stick with football. It's -7 for the game. That's the handicappers, and that's kind of a combination of the quality of the teams, but also public perception, because at the end of the day, they want bets on each side 50-50. You guys presumably are not focused on public perception. You're looking at reality of the true likelihood of this team covering the 7 points, or this particular player getting more than 2.5 sacks, or whatever the thing is, right? And focusing in on that, and therefore the player might be able to see an edge because the statistical probability of something is a little bit off of what the line is.
Exactly. And we then provide the comparison of where the odds are within the different operators to allow that consumer to find the best odds. So we're a research tool before people want to place the bet. We're also an in-game tool that allows them to find the biggest discrepancy between the probability versus the odds. And then we're also capable of allowing people to really see what's happened in the past. So one of the benefits we have of building an odds comparison site for so many years is we have years and years of data. So this is not a current function, but I can imagine in the future that we would also be able to show how likely it is that the line will move, by how much and when, to then also educate the consumer on when to be placing the bet between the relative predictive outcome and then when the prices are moving, which I think is a powerful tool that allows people to find the best value.
So in-game stuff, obviously, very time intensive, analytics intensive. So what in games are you covering for the US? Are you doing all the NFL?
NFL, NBA. We also cover hockey, baseball, and then we do college sports as well. So we can cover pretty much all the major sports and professional and college in the US at the moment. And then we're also looking at soccer, and then we're broadening it out to other sports over time as and when we get to kind of train the computers to be able to do that.
Wow. So presumably that's a lot of AI, because that's probably
Yeah.
the only way you could do it. However, how does it work? Go ahead.
Just quickly on that, the answer is no, because I think I talk a lot about human and machine as well. Because if you look at all of the major betting syndicates, the trading teams within sports books, they all have a high portion of AI driven, data driven with AI on top, predictions and probabilities. But in addition, you need humans to then review that data and make sure that they're getting rid of the outliers that don't make any sense. So you probably find any major trading team or company like us has humans building out and interrogating and training the computers to look at those things that we know better than a computer would likely happen.
What about the raw data? So if there's an injury in a football game, do you need a person watching that live to enter that data in, or you guys are getting a feed that's automatically sending that injury to you?
Yeah, no, we get live feeds on that. So we use in that case, if it's live in game, then you will get a computer AI driven probability off the bat, which we may tune over time once we've had some time to react to it. So we would start with a probability AI driven that could then be tuned by people.
So let's stay on this for a second, because I'm curious about it, because I've been hearing about these leagues making money off of providing the official information and statistics, right?
Yeah.
So if there's an injury in an NFL game, is that information coming from the NFL in some type of subscription
Yes.
feed? Yes.
Yeah, that comes via the data providers. So I think it's Genius that would own the NFL, and for the NBA, I believe it's Sport Radar. So we basically take low latency, real-time data, and then we react to it with our machines that we've trained over many years to then take that data and then produce those probabilistic outcomes.
So that's what Genius is. I keep hearing that name, Genius. That's their
They're a
forte.
sports data provider that are licensed by the NFL to be able to share real-time sports data.
And you guys subscribe to that?
And we benefit from that data and other data providers like Sport Radar and others to be able to utilize it, depending on the different sports, because ideally you want to be building any stats or any probabilistic outcomes on the best feed you possibly can that has the highest quality, but is broad, but also is deep enough to give us the level of insight we need.
Mm-hmm. But you got to pay for that information, right?
You do. Yeah, no, inevitably you do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
and go ahead.
Cool.
So I was going to get to your revenue model. So who's paying for your information, or how are you guys making money?
A variety of different ways. So we can consumers can get an ad-free version where they can get access and they pay for it via a subscription. And then we provide all the tools and technology in an ad-free environment that allows them to see that data. And then we provide them with additional tools and technology to be able to see that in an ad-free world. We also provide a kind of paid advertising environment. So sports betting companies and other advertisers will pay for the inventory on the page, and the consumer can still get access to that data, but they have less customization and it's more restricted in terms of the kind of tools themselves. In addition to that, in the UK, which is not yet possible in the US, but hopefully will be at some stage, we're like the booking.com of the UK market, where we get people to register on our platform, they see our data and information, and then they directly transact through our platform. So they can react real time during a game, a soccer game, and someone's just, they think someone's going to about to score, or I don't know, someone's been substituted. They will see the movement of the price, they will see our probability, and then they can transact immediately on that whilst they're watching the game.
So in the US, so what is the app that people want to download in the US?
It's Oddschecker. So our brand in the US that has the most is Oddschecker and Oddschecker Plus. Oddschecker Plus is our subscription service. Oddschecker is the general site that we offer people the ability to be able to see our tools and technology. And we're constantly evolving that marrying of tools, technology, data, predictions, odds, all into that user experience. So you're going to see us innovating a lot in this market.
Cool. So check out Oddschecker. I'm going to be downloading that as soon as we get off, because we've got a big weekend of football about to start here. And in addition, I do have to ask you about, for personal reasons, boxing, because we've got a bout coming up. Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Are you? Well, let's start with, do you guys track boxing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're very lucky. We're very fortunate to have a number of the top heavyweights of the world at the moment that we're in the UK. So all lost recently, which is not ideal. But yeah, boxing has a huge fan base in the UK and in Europe.
So I mean, it's just so funny to think about these different sports, because they're comparing football/soccer to boxing. I mean, they're just two entirely different things. So I mean, just in a nutshell, in a minute, describe for me how you guys can analyze boxing and put out projections for boxing.
Well, we don't do projections for boxing at the moment, but that's certainly something we could do, because there is official data both on UFC and also boxing, but that's not a major sport for us to cover at the moment. But what I would say about boxing that's been fascinating is that these kind of bouts that you're talking about have been incredible for the operators, for the sports betting books, to be able to use it as a marketing tool to garner interest in betting on boxing. And we see a big bump around some of these celebrity matches that have allowed operators to get in front of a broader range of consumers and see them get really interested in the sport. So it's been really good for the sport, boxing, and it's also been very good for the monetization of that sport. And it also helps us because we see a bump in traffic around these kind of things. You could say the same thing with political and elections as well. Anything that's celebrity related or politics drives a big increase in traffic. That traffic then gives people like us the opportunity to advertise to those consumers. So although the kind of purists in boxing have a bit of an allergic reaction to some of these celebrity bouts, it's incredibly good for the sport, and it increases visibility dramatically.
Well, be careful about calling this one a celebrity bout, because this one is sanctioned by the state of Texas. And Mike Tyson became a celebrity because he was the best boxer in the world. Now, this other guy, maybe you could call him a celebrity because he did it in reverse, apparently. And I didn't follow this guy at all, and I don't know if you followed him, but he was some type of YouTube personality who then got into right, and then he got into MMA. And then he got into boxing. I guess this is about his 10th boxing official bout, and I think he's like 9-1. He fought. Isn't Tyson Fury is from the UK, right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's from the UK. Yeah.
Yeah, and this guy fought his brother.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and Tommy Fury is a celebrity. Although he's a pretty good he is a professional boxer as well, but he's also done a number of shows that means that he's got a celebrity status as well. He had a very famous wife, for example.
So where would you put? I'm trying to measure up this Jake Paul because I think he lost to Fury's brother in a
He
decision.
did. He did, but it was I think it was a controversial decision.
Uh-huh.
But well, where would we put it? I'd call it a celebrity boxing match that is great for the sport, but is not. You cannot put it in the same league as Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Deontay White, Wilder. You just
So,
cannot.
so
It's not the same.
So to be clear, Fury's brother in the
Yes.
UK is more of a celebrity than he is an actual boxer.
Well, that's a dangerous thing to say, and his father would probably fall out with me. But yes, in principle. But he's the really interesting case study to say that he has that. He's the kind of person you want to be able to fight because boxers have always been huge personalities, but he's managed to have an enormous social media following as well because of some of the stuff that he's done on live TV programs.
Well, good. Then that's kind of confirming what I'm thinking. Mike Tyson is 58 years old. However, he is, a absolute genius when it
A
comes to
legend.
boxing. Not,
Totally.
based on his training, Customato, etc. Not to mention, a dangerous man. So my money is going on Mike Tyson. But the books here are still, they don't know what to make of this fight because they don't. It's a borderline exhibition fight, even though slash celebrity fight, even though it is sanctioned. And from what I'm hearing, Mike Tyson is taking it very, very seriously.
Yeah, well, look, any chance to see him fight again is amazing. He's an incredible boxer. He's a generational talent that to get him out again, and if he gets himself in shape, then I think there's very few people that know boxing that would want to face him, right?
Yeah.
He's a very good boxer.
You got a lot of old guys like me rooting for him.
Yeah, me
Saying
too.
we can
Me
still do
too.
it. We
He
can
can
we,
still
we
do
can
it.
play more
It's
than
kind of like the
we can play
Rocky
more
movie,
than
though, right?
pickleball. I know.
Yeah.
You know what? There's going to have to be a Rocky 7 now because we all thought that Rocky 6 was an absurd one, even though it was a pretty good Rocky where he fights at whatever age he was. But now Tyson is
Yeah.
fighting at 58. We need Rocky to come out of retirement at 78.
Yeah, it's amazing how these movies come to reality over time. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Absolutely. Well, last thing we promised to talk about the election of Donald Trump and what that might mean. We all saw that Bitcoin certainly has gone up as a result, and that seems to kind of be intertwined to some extent with sports betting. The stock markets, of course, went up substantially. As far as any actual direct impact on sports betting, I don't see anything direct from a Trump presidency. As you know, it's up to the states. There's really not much that the federal government needs to do to further spur on sports betting that I can think of. I don't know if embracing cryptocurrencies helps sports betting that much. I get maybe it does if it's easier to fund your account and withdraw from your account. Anyway, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to ask you really. I think, do you think ignoring Trump winning, which is obviously, as you say, it's more state regulated, state regulation that is going to affect things. But do you think that the Republicans having more of the Senate is going to like accelerate any of the bigger states that we've been speaking about for a while?
I really don't see it. I really don't see it. I would love for that to be the case, and but it really is so state by state. So we're sitting back looking at Texas still. We're looking at California. Mark Cuban, owner of the Dallas Mavericks, partnered with Sands. You may have heard about that. Trying to do something downtown Dallas in the sports betting field. Mark Cuban technically lost because he was a Kamala supporter,
Right.
and he's also. I'll say this. This might be more relevant. Texas went very heavily for Trump, like by 14 points. So it was considered a purple state, but it's looking more red Republican now. And usually that's not great for gaming. Gaming is a weird thing when you look at the political parties, because on the one hand, the social conservatives, Republicans, would be kind of more conservative socially, including not wanting gambling to be legal. But then again, the Republicans tend to want less regulation and more things opened up, right?
Yeah.
And more privatization of things and so on. So, I haven't. There's not a direct correlation between the parties and party success, I think, in gaming. What you have more is the intricacies of what's going on in a particular state. So you saw
Yeah.
Florida got gaming, but guess what? It's only Hard Rock because the Seminoles are so powerful there that
Yeah.
that's it, and that's the game, and that's the only way it was going to happen. California tribes, tons of tribes. There's 50 tribes in California, but there's 10 really big ones. But they really control what's going to happen in California, and they haven't been able to get on the same page as far as what that looks like. Is it land-based? Is it online, etc.? So that's why it hasn't happened in California yet. Texas, you have just a very anti-gaming environment there. They barely have a lottery, never had any casinos, land-based casinos. So that's what's holding up things in Texas. I'm trying to think what other. Those are the two I'm always thinking about. Florida used to be one of them. Is there another big state or two that everybody's watching?
No, it's Texas, Florida, and California are the main ones. I think what's my take on it, for what it's worth, because obviously we're a global company, so we see all different states of maturity of regulation, but the UK being arguably one of the most mature countries to have legalized gambling. And I think what's really interesting from looking at all the different markets is that when you ban a gambling or it's not available, the black market obviously grows. If the black market grows, then the protections that are available to consumers in a regulated environment disappear. If they disappear, then the toxicity and the more dangerous side of gambling, through also with casino, slots, and other things, starts to creep in. So I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had about should what's the point of regulation? And in my opinion, it's to protect the consumer as much as possible, allow them to have entertainment and still participate in sport through sport betting. It's good for sport, it's good for people, if they're protected and managed in a certain way, which we can do very well through data and technology. So this regulatory argument in some of the bigger states is a very kind of philosophical discussion as opposed to a practical one, which says the US market of those big states is probably the largest black market globally. And there's a whole bunch of consumers that are probably underage that are also not being protected in such a way that they would be in a regulated environment. So regulation is not to stop, it's to kind of protect and turn it more into entertainment and fun, as opposed to a toxic thing that people do offshore and through black markets. And I think there's a really interesting discussion going on sweepstakes and stuff like that as being the gateway drug to that at the moment. So the US is quite the big states are really interesting to me, that there's a lot to be learned from the UK and other markets about how regulation can protect the consumer and stop offshore as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, I think Florida's done. That's Hard Rock, and people have only one option, but they've got an option. What you just had to say, I think, is particularly relevant in Texas, because I do think, for the most part, in Texas, it's an anti-gambling mentality that's kept out sports betting. But I'm sure that view is starting to prevail in Texas. And so it's a matter of time that view prevails. And then California, I think, is all on board. They've got no problem with sports gambling. It's just a matter of logistically working out who's going to get the licenses and how it's going to pass. We had a couple initiatives, ballot initiatives 4 years ago that were super confusing, and people voted them both down because it was the tribes basically fighting with each other, and it was confusing. So they need to get their shit together basically here in California. But there's so much else going on in California. It does require, I think it requires an initiative. I think it requires a vote of the people. So it'll probably be on the ballot in 2 years, would be my guess. And that could be it. when that happens. The last little wrinkle to all this that is starting to bubble up, I believe, in the U.S. is, okay, we legalized it, and now, holy cow, we didn't realize that every other ad when you're watching an NFL game was going to be for sports betting, and that the announcers were going to be constantly talking about it, and it's going to be scrolling across the screen during the game and so on. I personally think it's a little bit much. I'm a huge fan of making everything legal, but as far as advertising it, like we advertise our state lotteries. The state lottery, the government spends money advertising. Like, wait a minute, guys, that wasn't really the intent of the lottery. The intent of the lottery was like, look, they're going to do it anyway. Let's tax it and regulate it, get the mafia out of the lottery, let the state run it. But were we really supposed to be encouraging our citizens to gamble? Is that what should the government be encouraging people by spending their money to encourage them to gamble? I think no. And then it kind of bleeds into a similar argument with sports betting. Now, there, at least it's private companies that are doing the advertising, but some reasonable limits on that. I guess I'll just ask you a question to end it here. What has the UK done in that regard? Do they put significant limits on advertising or not?
So I think that there is a lot of restrictions on advertising in the UK, but the example I would use is Italy. So Italy is the second largest market in Europe and the third largest globally, I think, in terms of sports betting handle. So as a market, they banned advertising, and yet, sports betting is still a mainstream part of society, and it's controlled and it's regulated in a good way. And companies like us can still provide tools and technology to support the betting industry, but the way that advertising is done is a lot more conservative, which I really like, to be honest. And I agree with you that sports betting is, although it's a game of chance, as we spoke about earlier, there's huge amounts of tools and technology. And you could argue, which I'm not, but you could, and I've heard this argument before, that, in similar to a financial market, if you're making investments in stocks and shares, you could argue there's more sports data available to make more informed decisions. So it's less of a game of chance. Whereas the more toxic side of slots and casino online can be highly addictive and can be problematic. And that's where I think the UK has done a good job in terms of really managing the advertising for that environment and making sure that it doesn't kind of get out of control. So I'm a big fan of regulation. I'm a massive fan of making sure that the advertising is reasonable and fair. That kind of plays into our brand as well, and make sure that the consumer is protected at all times and given the best chance of having an entertaining kind of complement to a sports match, but also protected to make sure that things don't go wrong.
I'm glad that we were able to get past that silly revolution from 250 years ago and start working again together, our countries hand in hand. Who would have guessed it would come to this and we'd be working together on sports betting? But love it, appreciate it. Thanks so much for your insight. Love the discussion. Stuart Sims, CEO, FairPlay Sports Media Group. Here in the U.S., check out Oddschecker. Check out the website and the app. Download it today. I know I'm going to. And Stuart, really enjoyed it. You can go finally have a cocktail there.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Stuart. And take care, everyone. We'll be back soon with another episode, we promise, of Double Down with Breslo.
Thank you.